What up, YouTube? It's your boy. Shamelessly using my baby because she's really cute. Say hello. All right, good enough. Excited to be joining you guys for our first Digital Magnify tonight. Everything that's been going on in society right now in our culture, it's had me reflecting a lot on certain things that have afflicted me in the past, or certain hardships and sufferings that we're currently going through in society today. It's just caused me a lot to just dwell on this idea of suffering, this idea of difficulty, and how the Lord calls us to know Him more and more through it. So I was thinking particularly on a saint that has always had a huge influence on my life. And this particular saint, he was a young man in Poland studying to become a priest. While he was studying to become a priest, he wrote a letter to his mom, and in that letter he said, "Pray that I may love without limits. Pray that I may love without any limits." And that kind of became the focus of his entire life. He became ordained a priest, had a great priestly ministry in Poland, went to Japan, had an incredible missionary presence there, came back to Poland, continued to teach in the seminary for a few years. And then when he was getting towards his late 30s, early 40s, this was during the outbreak of World War II, he was rounded up by the Nazis with Jewish people and other supposed enemies of the Nazi regime, and he was sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp. And when he was in Auschwitz, he was enduring these terrible work conditions, he was enduring these terrible living conditions. In one particular circumstance, all the members of his cell block were called out because one of the Jewish people had escaped from Auschwitz and had somehow gotten through their fences and ran away. And so in retribution for that person escaping, they were going to select 10 members at random to be sent to a starvation bunker to be there to starve and die. And so one man was selected. He got down on his knees and he cried, "My wife and my children." And very serenely, calmly, this man passed through all of the people there, and he looked at the Nazi guard who was calling out all these names, and he said, "I will take the place of this man." He said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am a Catholic priest." That Catholic priest was St. Maximilian Kolbe, a story that many of you know. But what's beautiful about the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe is that during his time in Auschwitz, up until being in that starvation bunker as well, St. Maximilian Kolbe always exemplified peace, joy, happiness, devotion to God. He was realistic about the hardships that were going on, that his people were enduring, but at the same time, he knew that God was with him, and he held that peace and joy within his heart at all moments. Even when he was in that starvation bunker and going through this 2-week process of being starved to death, he knew the peace of God that was in his heart and continually journeyed deeper and deeper and deeper into his heart. He encouraged the other people around him in prayer and in hymns, and he heard their confessions, and he gave them hope when it seemed that there was no hope left. And people even say that at the moment of his death, when he was injected with acid because he literally wouldn't die, they said that St. Maximilian Kolbe had a face of serenity and a face of peace. And so the reason why I bring this up is that St. Maximilian Kolbe gives us a great example to follow for us in these hardships right now. Now, granted, St. Maximilian Kolbe's story kind of tunes us into, even though we are going through a very acute hardship right now, he went through something much more difficult, right? At the same time, we're able to recognize that, yes, there are a lot of difficulties that we're facing right now. Schools are shut down. Things that you were looking forward to for a long time, you might not get to do, like prom or graduation, even a retreat like Luke 18 for some of you. We just don't know what's going to happen with that yet. And in this variety of difficulties, it can be easy to kind of just either kind of go through it and not really address it and kind of just be like, well, I'm at home all day, and so I'm just really, just going to make the most of it and not do anything and just chill and relax. Or two, it can be easy to despair and say, oh my gosh, these terrible things that are afflicting us, and these terrible things that we're going through, where is the hope? Where is God in all of this? And we're going to talk about suffering a little bit more in the weeks to come, but particularly for today, what I want to invite you to reflect on is that St. Maximilian Kolbe gives us a model to follow, no matter the circumstance, no matter the hardship, no matter the difficulty. And the model is this: no matter where you are planted, you are able to practice faith, hope, and love. You are able to make God's presence known through that faith, hope, and love. So when we think about the virtues of faith, hope, and love, why do we have these virtues? Well, God gives us these virtues because he wants us to be able to look like him, right? Faith, hope, and love aren't virtues that we kind of just like gain by ourselves in our own doing, but we are given these virtues because God wants to give them to us so that we can be like him and that we can know him and imitate him to others. So when you think about the virtue of faith, right? The virtue that we freely assent to all that God has given to us for our belief. The virtue of faith, we're still able to practice that right now where we are planted. To not lose hope, but to remember that God is faithful to us always. Just like a husband and a wife are faithful to each other, God is faithful to us. And so to remember that in the back of your mind, even through this really terrible time, God is faithful to us. And to remember all of the good things that he's done for us in the past, and to look ahead towards all the ways that he's going to continue to bless us in the future. So practically speaking, if you haven't yet, start a prayer routine, 10 to 15 minutes a day. You're going to have the free time now to be able to do that a lot more. But start a prayer routine and really give that time up for God. Read some Lives of the Saints if you have any books of the saints lying around, or buy some off of Amazon and start reading about the lives of the saints so that you can grow in understanding of faith and what God has revealed to us. Secondly, when you think about the virtue of hope, hope is the virtue where we long for the kingdom of heaven and eternal life with God. And so when we practice the virtue of hope, notice what that doesn't say, right? The virtue of hope isn't like, okay, we have hope in God and we hope for God as our happiness plus all of our other possessions, right? Like, I hope for God, he's going to be my happiness, he's going to be my everything, but I also want my books, or I also want my video games, or I also want my time on Netflix, or my ability to eat whatever I want when I can eat it. Hope calls us to have God as our sole focus of happiness and our sole focus of longing on this earth. And so during this time especially, I think God is calling us in a very, beard scratch by the way, not nose scratch. I think God is really truly calling us in a very unique way to rid ourselves of the things that we so often hold in front of God. All of these cancellations that are happening, these things that we're not able to get as easily as we were able to get them, I really do think God is calling us to know him on a deeper level and to long for him on a deeper level. So during this time, practically, we can utilize this time for a variety of things, but I truly ask yourself to consider this question. What is most important to me? What is most important to me? And then allowing that to inform how you structure your day. Making God the most important thing and not Netflix. Making God the most important thing and not time spent on video games. Making God the most important thing and nothing else. You're going to have a lot of free time during this break that you have. Some of you are e-learning, some of you are not e-learning, but in this break from school that you're going through, use this time in order to know God better and to identify, okay, what are things that even though I have the capability to do these now, like I can limit these in order to show God that I love him more than those things. So when it comes to video games or Netflix or social media, any of those things that like now you're going to be tempted to use those more than ever, allow God to kind of purify your heart and say, what's the most important thing? Am I the most important thing? And truly using this to restructure your time in that way and making your life intentionally focused on God. And the last one is love, right? The greatest of all virtues. God gives us love so that we can love him for his own sake and that we can love other people as God wants us to love them. This virtue of love is the greatest because when you think about it, like hope without love, it just makes no sense, right? Like what are we hoping in if we don't actually love God? There's no reason to hope in heaven if we don't love him. And then two, our faith is vain without love. It makes no sense without love. Why would you freely assent to something if you didn't love it with all your heart, soul, and strength, right? So for our purposes and times right now, maybe God is calling you to a deeper love for him and for a deeper love for others around you. I truly believe that God might be using this time to do that for each and every single one of us, to call you to a deeper level than you were at before in loving him. So when you think about that, practically speaking, you can think about that in a variety of ways, but I'll just challenge you to two. Number one, think on your love for God. Like, what are ways that you can show God that you love him during the next 3 weeks especially? What are ways that you can grow in prayer? What are ways that you can grow in just devoting your time to God in unique ways throughout the next few weeks? But also as well, think of the love that you have for others, specifically your family, your friends, your siblings. Your family and your siblings, you're going to be right near them. So what are things that you can do to show your love for them? Chores that you can do for them. Conversations that you can have with your siblings that you may not usually have had before. Really invite the Lord to kind of purify your heart and to say, Lord, do I love you above all things? And do I love you for your own sake, or do I just love you because of all the other things that are attached to it, or just because like I've done this my whole entire life, right? St. Basil has this really cool, interesting theory where he says like we view God and love as either a slave, a mercenary, or as a child. When you view him as a slave, you just do things out of fear that you're going to be punished if you don't do them. When you view him as a mercenary, you just kind of do things for him because you want the reward of it, right? So like, I just follow faith because I think it's the right thing to do, or because like I know that this proclaimed that I'm going to go to heaven someday because of it, so I'm going to do that, right? A mercenary fights in an army for payment, and so that's kind of the same way, right? Like we're not loving God for his sake, but we're just doing it because of the reward. But a true love is a child saying, I love you because of who you are, and I'm going to follow you because of who you are. And that's ultimately what I want. So maybe that's an interesting thing for you to reflect on and pray with over the next few weeks. Like, do I truly view God as a child, and do I love him in that same way? Faith, hope, and love. God is calling us to witness these no matter where we are. The reality is right now we don't have access to the Mass in the way that we usually do. There's still being Masses offered by the priest, but we don't get to receive the Eucharist. And that's a great hardship, and I know that we are all struggling a lot because of that. We're isolated a lot, and so a lot of us I know aren't being allowed to go to church and to go up to the chapel to pray even though it's open. And so that's particularly difficult. Like, Lord, how are you calling me deeper into your own heart when I don't have the ability to do these things that I always used to do, these outward things that I used to do to show you that I love you? To that end, I want to turn your attention to the readings that we had for this Sunday, just to end here. In the readings for Mass this Sunday, they were talking about the healing of a man born blind. The gospel was talking about this blind man who was blind from birth, and Jesus performed this miraculous healing. But in this story, more important, I think, than the blind man's healing in this instance is the Pharisees and what they go through. So this blind man is healed, and these Pharisees immediately summon the blind man to question him. Who is it that has healed you? Who is it that has performed this miracle? And the blind man says, it's Jesus. Jesus is the one that's healed me. But the Pharisees, they reject him, and they say that's not true. And out of their hardness of heart, they say that God, Jesus Christ, couldn't have been the one who has done this, right? So when you think about the Pharisees in this story, like, they appear on a better level than the blind man, right? Like, they aren't blind and poor and begging. They are exalted. They are Pharisees. They are in the temple. They are practicing the law of God, and they have everything together, and they know what they are doing. And yet, even though they're doing all these things on outward appearance, and it seems like on outward appearance they know God, interiorly they don't know him. Interiorly they don't love him whatsoever. This blind man is given the gift of sight. He's given the gift to see Jesus. And to that end, Jesus says the following words at the end of this gospel. He says, that for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind. That those who do not see may see, and that those who do see may become blind. I think this is particularly pertinent for our times because we have had a lot of outward things that we can do in the faith ripped away from us. So the Mass, easy access to learning the faith in school for some of you that go to Catholic school, the ability to easily go to the chapel or church and just pray. We've had these outward things taken away from us. And I really do think, particularly in this time as well, the Lord is calling us to love him more and more and more, and to understand these outward things, they are good, but they are only good insofar as you are doing them for love of me. True, genuine love of me, and seeking me for my own sake. So just to kind of wrap up here, I take all these things that we've been talking about with faith, hope, and love, and the example of St. Maximilian Kolbe, and I just particularly reflect on how St. Maximilian Kolbe was able to make that cell in Auschwitz his own sort of church. Now, with a caveat, we can't make the church happen in our homes necessarily, right? Like the sacraments are the sacraments and the Eucharist is the Eucharist, and we need to long for that and hope that we're going to be restored to that someday. But at the same time, recognize that where you are right now, you have the ability to practice faith, hope, and love, like St. Maximilian Kolbe did. And by practicing faith, hope, and love, you are able to make God present. Number one, you are able to know him more and you're able to grow in intimacy with him. And number two, you are able to give that presence to others and to be a hope and inspiration for others who are in your own house right now and in your own neighborhood that you might be seeing and interacting around. So during this time where we're isolated, where we're practicing social distancing, allow yourself to grow closer to the Lord and to truly reflect on what God is doing through this time in order to draw us closer to his own heart, in order to instill in us a deeper sense of faith, hope, and love. Because if you practice these three virtues and if you truly seek these as you're going through the next few weeks, you're going to grow closer to the Lord and you're going to grow closer to those around you, and you're going to ultimately love God for who he is and grow in love for people around you. So I encourage you, utilize these virtues over the next few weeks, really pray with them, really dive deep with them, and journey deeper and deeper and deeper into the Lord's heart. Above all, trust in Mother Mary and ask for her intercession that she can guide you and that she can help you in this journey. Thank you guys so much. I'm looking forward to chatting with my discipleship group over on Zoom, and I hope you guys are looking forward to chatting with your discipleship groups as well. I love you guys. I miss you dearly, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Peace. AMDG.